An MMA fighter stabbed a man to death in a hotel room. Andrew Osborne is a former MMA fighter. He's from Philadelphia and his professional career included 3 professional fights. He has 1 win and 2 losses. On the 23rd of September 2022, he was in a hotel room with another man. This was 47-year-old Brian Wilkinson from Egg Harbor Township. The pair were at the Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. Now, although it's not known what the motive was for this attack, Andrew has admitted to stabbing the man to death before fleeing with his wife. The pair had made their way back to Philadelphia. Thankfully, police did manage to track Andrew down and then remand him in custody. Andrew, who is now 35 years old, has pleaded guilty to first-degree aggravated manslaughter. He is due to be sentenced for the killing in August this year.
This is the most disturbing and unsettling thing you will ever watch. This is called The Strange Thing About the Johnsons, and it's the most disturbing short film ever. It's written and directed by Ari Aster, who did Hereditary and Midsommar, and we all know how scary and messed up those movies are. The film follows the Johnson family, who is just a normal suburban family, but as the film goes on, a shocking secret is revealed, and this secret will make you sick to your stomach. I'm not going to spoil anything, but I remember my first time watching this and I couldn't stop saying, what the hell is going on? This film just has such an unsettling vibe to it and it'll make you feel so uneasy. You can watch the whole film on YouTube right now and it's only around 29 minutes. But don't let the short time fool you, this film is absolutely disturbing. After you watch The Strange Thing About the Johnsons, come back to this video and let me know your thoughts on it. This is completely disturbing and messed up and not everyone can finish it. And you will find out extremely quickly when you start watching it. And a word of advice, whatever you do, never watch this with your parents.
The next story was from my aunt, my great aunt to be specific. I want you guys to let me know what you guys think. If you guys think she saw the devil or... I don't know what it is, bro.
The devil?
So recently, my great aunt from Mexico is visiting and she's staying with my other aunt. It was one of those nights where they were just chilling, talking, having fun. And she said that around 12 is when everybody started going to the rooms to sleep. When she was getting close to knocking out, she said that she started hearing horses outside the window, walking on the road. She was like... Horses? There's no fucking horses around here. I didn't see no fucking horses around here. Mind you, they live in the suburbs.
There's no horses around yet.
So she gets up quietly and then she looks out the window and she sees nothing. So she lays back down, tries to go to sleep again. But this time, she ends up hearing the front door open. And then she hears somebody coming up the stairs slowly. And at that point, she gets up from the couch slowly, but like she's just listening to see if somebody will come up the stairs and she'll see somebody come up from the stairs. But she doesn't. And she starts walking to the railing slowly. And she says that she was about to look over the railing, but she just had like an overwhelming feeling of dread and being scared. So she just decided not to look over the railing. She ends up going back to the couch, tries to like play it off saying it's nothing, it's just probably just like the house is old. And then she hears it again, same thing, walking up the stairs. And
this man murdered his wife and 3 children before turning the gun on himself. He survived his attempt to take his own life, and this is the mugshot that came out of this. Meet Charles Robert Gillard Sr. In May of 2022, Charles snapped. At the end of May in 2022, at around 2:30 p.m., the police were called to this residence in Michigan. When they arrived, they were met with an extremely gruesome scene. They found the bodies of a mother, a father, and 3 children. All had been shot, and nobody had any idea what had happened. The children were identified as Ronald, Joshua, and Dawn Gillard. They were only 3, 4, and 6 years old. And the woman whose body they found was 40-year-old Dawn Gillard. The first responders who responded to this crime scene have gone on the record and stated that it was the most gruesome thing they'd ever come across. The first responders, in fact, had no words to offer upon seeing the scene. It was truly unlike anything they had ever witnessed. So I haven't been able to find any more information about what exactly led up to this incident, but it's known that on that day, Charles Gillard took a gun, murdered his wife and 3 children, and then tried to take his own life but failed miserably. He survived his own unaliving attempt, spent weeks in the hospital recovering, and now he's going to prison. I'm honestly glad he lived so that he could be sent to prison because this man really needs to suffer.
Take a closer look at this photo. Although at first glance this looks like a lovely family photograph, if you look closer it's just about the most disturbing photo that you could see. It was New Year's Day 2011 in Caloocan in the Philippines. Local politician Reynaldo Dagsa was 35. He was a member of the Peacekeeping Action Team and therefore had inadvertently made enemies with people involved in organised crime. He was gathered together with his family outside of his house. He was just about to take a photo of them all together. That's when his assassin popped round the corner. Captured in the image is a man aiming a weapon at Reynaldo. He had unknowingly taken a photo of his killer assassinating him. Milliseconds later, Reynaldo was shot dead. Now, the photo that he had taken, obviously understandably, was heartbreaking, but it was like gold dust to the investigators. They now had a clear photograph of the killer. They were able to identify the gunman as a convicted robber from the area who was out on parole. His name was Arnel Buenflor. It's believed that he took a disliking to Reynaldo due to the fact that he'd helped to get him arrested. Following the assassination, he was arrested once more. His accomplices were also arrested shortly after.
Disturbing videos that I've seen in a long time. Wait, there's a video to this? Multiple videos to this, bro. Just so you guys can see how everything is and just get a grasp of what I'm gonna get into.
Along with this, cooperate with this. We'll be as nice as we can to you within the limits of keeping you prisoners. If you don't go along with this, they'll probably take you into bed, tie you down, rape you.
The woman in that video, her name is Kathleen Allen, one of many victims of the dual serial killers Leonard Lake and Charles Ng. Very, very infamous serial killers in California. They had this obsession with having... So they would capture their victims, they would torture them, SA them, and then murder them in this cabin that Leonard Lake built and put VHS cameras on every single room, so obviously he could record all the torture, everything that they would go through. 12 victims. It's confirmed 12. Some people say it could have been 25 victims. He also recorded a manifesto in his bunker, which I'm gonna show you right now, which is obviously also very, very disturbing because he tells you why he's doing it, what's he gonna do.
Good evening. It's a Sunday in October.
That's Lake. Yep.
This tape, what you're hearing now, is going to be the lead-in, the imprisonment of a young lady who probably at this moment is unknown to me. What I want is an off-the-shelf sex partner. I want to be able to use the woman, and when I'm tired or satiated.
This is the bear video, one of the worst animal attacks caught on camera, explained. The local forest department of this village organized this bear hunt because of the bear attacks against humans in the area. The man in the video was tracking the bear for a while and even set up a trap, but he was ambushed and mauled. The victim's piercing screams alerted his colleagues who would rush to the scene, and one of the victim's fellow hunters filmed the gruesome encounter. As you play the video, you see the man laid out on the floor wearing a green jacket with the female sloth bear on top of him, and immediately you hear the victim's awful screams, and these screams are way different from any of the screams you will ever hear. The camera zooms in and you see the bear has almost mounted the victim and has its jaws locked around the victim's face. And it seems the bear is going for the throat. Loud commotion can be heard in the background and the crowd tries to stop the bear from attacking by firing their guns and throwing stones at it. As the victim wrestles underneath the bear, you see some of his injuries. His face and throat are covered in blood and the ground is also stained with blood. You can see the bear bite his face and pull, ripping a piece of flesh from his face. The bear then shakes its head to get the blood off its face, and it then goes in for another bite, and this time, biting the man's throat and pulling away sharply, and it appears as a piece of flesh hanging from the victim's head. The video then ends as the mauling is still taking place. There's rumors that there's a longer version of this video, but I haven't seen it yet. According to reports, the attack lasted about 10 minutes until the bear was finally shot and killed, but the injuries the victim had would result in his death. I don't recommend looking for this video, mainly because of the graphic nature, but also because the screams of the victim are definitely the worst screams you will ever hear. Just imagine being attacked by a bear and being pinned down underneath it, while it just rips you apart and there's nothing you can do. The thought of that is just absolutely horrific.
This was the final photo of a man at a Halloween party before he was found dead. Chillingly, the case remains unsolved to this day. Chris Jenkins was a popular and smart 21-year-old. He was studying business at the University of Minnesota. He was the captain of the lacrosse team and had a great sense of humor. It was Halloween 2002 and he attended a party with his girlfriend. At around midnight, he was kicked out of this party and left behind a few of his possessions. This included his phone, wallet, and jacket. The bouncer reportedly saw him walking away on his own and he was never to be seen alive again. Disturbingly, many other students disappeared in the same area. 6 days later, 22-year-old Michael Knoll vanished after going out to a bar. 3 days later, 20-year-old Josh Gumond also disappeared without a trace. He again had been at a party. They all disappeared in the Minneapolis area. They were roughly the same age, they were the same kind of height, and they'd all been to a party. On February the 27th, 2003, Chris's body was tragically discovered. He was found in the Mississippi River. An autopsy determined he'd drowned. Police claimed it was either an accident or a self-unaliving. Chris's parents, however, don't believe this, and they think their son was murdered. A private investigator got involved, and they said that he didn't seem to have injuries that would have been consistent with somebody who jumped off a bridge. There was also evidence to suggest that his body hadn't been in the river the entire time he was missing. Retired detectives also had a look at Chris's case. They said the position of his body and other physical evidence showed that it was no accident. In March, Michael's body was also discovered in water, but this time it was in a lake. In 2005, a prisoner came forward to give police a tip. He said that him and another man had tried to mug Chris that evening. He said that he had nothing of value on him, so they launched him into the river. However, this didn't sound right either. He was still wearing slip-on shoes, his shirt was still tucked in, and he had his arms crossed. Chris's case remains baffling, and at the moment it's still unsolved. There's also frustratingly little updates on the other male victims in the area.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
White House GIF. I don't know if you ever heard about this.
I never heard about the White House GIF, but I heard about like GIFs,
GIFs,
whatever.
yeah. And I got this from a YouTuber. He's the one that first talked about it, so I want to give him his credits. Lazy Masquerade. It's very, very eerie and disturbing once you know like the backstory to everything. We already know how those scary videos, crash videos were really popular back in the day. They would pop up. We would send them to people. This one wasn't as popular, but it was mostly associated with a video called Why You Never Became a Dancer.
So that's just the whole video?
A song by a band called White House. The song or whatever had nothing to do with the image it was showing, and the identity of the woman remained unknown for like a really long time. So it wasn't until June of last year that they found out who she really was, and a lot of people thought it was fake until a Reddit user, his name was Lane Campbell 77, ended up posting on his Reddit thread that he found a book that was about a Japanese serial killer. His name was Kiyoshi Akubo. He was one of Japan's most notorious serial killers. He had killed 8 victims, one of them being that girl. And her name was Reiko Takemura. One day he had picked her up, the same thing that he did to everybody else, asked her if she wanted to be a model so he could paint. When in this car, Kiyoshi got the impression that Reiko, she liked him. Kiyoshi tried to say that, let's go back to like a motel. Reiko was saying, do you really think I'm that type of girl? Later on, they ended up going through this forest road, and he tried to force himself onto her. She obviously slapped him. She tried to run away. He caught up to her. He strangled her to death. The only reason he was caught was because of Reiko's brother. He made it his mission to find Kiyoshi. It was just one night where he...
Little boy woke up to find his parents and 3 brothers dead in their home. He was the only one left alive. In November 2022, an episode of Discover Oklahoma aired on TV. The show featured a couple, Jonathan and Lindsay Candy, talking about their experience of living in the area. The pair were described as customers of a local bakery and talked about how much they loved the food. Less than 2 years later, they would be found deceased inside their home alongside their 3 sons. It was the 22nd of April 2024. A 10-year-old boy placed a panicked 911 call explaining that all of his family was dead. The boy, who is being kept anonymous at the moment, was in his bedroom asleep at the time of the killings. He had his door closed and a fan on. Inside the home was his dad, Jonathan, and his mum, Lindsay, deceased. 3 children were also killed inside the home: Dylan, aged 18, Ethan, aged 14, and Lucas, aged 12. It's reported that investigators believe the parents got into an altercation. Jonathan is then believed to have shot his wife and his 3 sons before turning the weapon on himself. The The child's uncle, named Brent, began a fundraiser online to help raise money for funeral costs and the costs of counselling for the boy. The child is believed to currently be staying with his family. The relatives of the child state, "Our entire family has been left shattered and confused with so many questions we won't ever have answers to. I simply can't fathom what went on, but please hug your family tight. It's going to be a very long healing process for everyone affected."
This young man got ran over by a train and lost both of his legs. In 2017, Jacob Ohl lost both of his legs below the knee when he was run over by a train in Liburn. Jacob was walking along the train tracks with earbuds on March 2nd when he sensed but didn't hear a train approaching behind him. Jacob's lawsuit also claims that the CSX train did not have properly functioning front-facing cameras, preventing the train's engineer and conductor from seeing Jacob in time to avoid hitting him. The CSX company also did not put up fencing or any other warning devices to keep pedestrians at a safe distance from the tracks. Jacob was also at least 1,000 feet away from the train when the conductor first saw him, but they did not ring the train's bell, blow the train's horn, or apply the emergency brake before hitting Jacob. It also took a half a mile for the train to completely stop after hitting Jacob. Now, what I'm about to show you is the 911 call Jacob made right after getting hit by the train. And keep in mind, he just lost both of his legs. They were literally amputated from his body from the train. And just listen to how calm he's talking. It's like he didn't even get hit by a train.
911, what's the location of your emergency? I just got hit by a train. Okay, where are you? I'm off the path of the park in downtown Melbourne. Okay, were you walking or were you driving? No, I was walking. Okay, but you're okay? Like you sound like you're... No. Okay, are you still on the tracks? No. Is there anybody around you that you can flag down? No. Okay, hold on a second. I'm going to try and figure out where you are, okay? Okay. And you're off the tracks, correct? Yes. Okay. How old are you, sir? 17. And what part of your body was hurt? My legs. Okay, are they broken? I think it cut them off. It cut them off?
Jeanette McCurdy has come out and made some pretty disturbing allegations about her time spent working at Nickelodeon, and people are convinced that they're about Dan Schneider. So if you remember, in 2022, Jeanette released her memoir, I'm Glad My Mom Died. And her book, which is a great read, dives into some really dark territory. But I want to talk about the times that she mentions someone called the Creator. In her book, Jeanette references the Creator a number of times, and people have jumped to the conclusion that the Creator may be referring to Dan Schneider, the man who created a bunch of the most popular shows on Nickelodeon. A man who has been called a creep many, many times. So let's talk about the book. In the book, Jeanette says that the Creator tried to persuade her to drink alcohol many times when she was a minor, and would say to her, "Come on, the kids from Victorious get drunk together all the time." She also claims that the Creator gave her an unwanted shoulder massage. This is a quote from her book. She said, "I want to say something to tell him to stop, but I'm so scared of offending him." Now, these connections are all alleged, keep in mind, but it has come out, and this has been confirmed, that Dan Schneider would have extremely angry outbursts on set, and people who worked for him were consistently afraid of him. And I want to remind you, we still don't know who the Creator is. But something else extremely compelling is that Jeanette says she was offered $300,000 by Nickelodeon to never go public about her experiences behind the scenes with the Creator. But she denied this payoff. And this is a quote from her in the book. She says, "I'm glad I didn't take it because I'm able to talk about it and I don't have to have that secret haunt me." So who exactly is the Creator? People still have no idea. But it is crazy. Nickelodeon offered her $300,000 preemptively to stop her from talking about her experiences with this mysterious man. And what exactly happened? I mean, we might never know. But $300,000 is a pretty big payoff. And whatever the Creator did must have been pretty bad. The only one that can really reveal all of this is Jeanette McCurdy herself.
Very gruesome video game.
A game?
That it could have potentially caused a murder or inspired a murder. Manhunt. I don't know if you ever seen or played the game and shit. It was a PlayStation 2 game that released in 2003.
I've never heard or played it
Never
before.
heard of Manhunt?
Nah.
The whole concept of this game is that you're basically a convict. You're on death row, getting the death penalty and shit. But it doesn't work. You wake up and some guy had put an earpiece in your ear and he's telling you what to do. He's like, yo, I got you with freedom, but you have to do everything I tell you.
Okay.
There's gonna be cameras everywhere you go, and you're basically gonna be making movies for me. So the whole video game is just you going around brutally criminals and stuff, right? But some of the scenes are so gory and shit that for its time, like I said, it's just disturbing.
Yeah.
This video game was also banned in Italy, Australia, Ireland, and different parts of the world because of how
Gory it was?
yeah, and how violent, and people believe that it would inspire people to start performing those like violent acts. Funny thing is too, I remember me and my brother playing this game.
For real?
Yes.
God.
See what I was saying, bro?
Bro just decapitated. Oh my gosh.
The reason why this even happened was because of the game. A year after the game was released, Warren LeBlanc, he ended up luring his friend Stefan Pakira
Okay.
to a park, and he beat him with like a claw hammer.
Sometimes true for stranger than fiction. The case of Richard Trenton Chase is a story which even the most depraved horror writer would struggle to create. Over the course of 4 weeks spanning across 1977 and 1978, Richard Chase took the lives of 6 innocent victims in Sacramento, California. His murders gradually progressed in violence, beginning with drive-by shootings and culminating in acts of cannibalism.
We need to talk about the infamous Russian pedophile and snuff film ring. So just so I'm factually correct, here's the article I'm talking about here. So in the year 2000, a massive scandal rocked Russia. In that year, Russian authorities uncovered a pedophile ring that ran all the way from Russia to the United States. There were over 5,000 members that were busted in different countries, but the exact details of these crimes are really hard to stomach, so viewer discretion is advised. Obviously, the police and authorities had to watch some of this content that was uncovered, and what they saw was absolutely disturbing. They saw hundreds of different children being abused by groups of men. And on top of that, after the abuse was over, these children were then brutally tortured and killed on camera. Now, something extremely disturbing is that these videos made over $470 million worth of revenue. Just stop and think about that for 1 second. Just stop and think about how much money that is that people were paying to watch these videos. There were people in the US purchasing these tapes. There were people in the Middle East, people in Russia, people in Italy. And in fact, when they were covering this news story, 2 European TV stations accidentally broadcast images and video from the tapes. Graphic, uncensored material. Obviously, the whole team that was involved in that was fired. But the police officers and authorities who actually worked on this case have gone on the record and said every single night since then, they still hear children screaming in their dreams. So these rings operated throughout many different countries, including Italy, Russia, all throughout the Middle East. And what the authorities think they were doing was snatching children out of orphanages and even at times targeting kids when they walked away from their parents at the circus. Now, thankfully, hundreds of people were arrested after this was uncovered and justice was dealt. And thankfully, Russia's prison system is pretty brutal, so I'm sure that the men who were put in there for these crimes got the justice that they deserved. But this is absolutely frightening because this stuff is still happening today in 2024. It's not just happening in Europe, it's happening in America. There's so much more we could get into here. But yeah, we need to continue to talk about this stuff to raise awareness that this is happening.
This is the murder of James Bulger, one of the most heartbreaking true crime cases ever. This is James Bulger, and he was a 2-year-old toddler living in Liverpool, England with his parents. And on February 12th, 1993, he was abducted from a shopping mall in Bootle, Merseyside. His father briefly let go of his hand while they were at the mall, and John Venables and Robert Thompson, who were both 10 years old at the time, approached James and lured him away. The abduction was caught on security cameras right here, and the footage showed the 2 boys leading James away. And after abducting James, John Venables and Robert Thompson took him on a harrowing journey through various locations in Liverpool, during which they subjected him to severe physical and emotional abuse. And you won't believe what these 2 10-year-olds did to this 2-year-old boy. They took James to train tracks where they threw blue paint into his eyes, kicked him, stomped on him, threw bricks and stones at him. They placed batteries in his mouth and may have inserted them into his anus, although none were found there. They dropped a 22-pound fish plate on his head. They hit him in the head with a metal bar countless times, which caused 10 skull fractures. James Bulger suffered so many injuries, 42 in total, that none could be identified as the fatal blow. Thompson and Venables then laid James across the railroad tracks and weighted his head down with rubble, hoping that a train would hit him and his death would be ruled as an accident. After that, they left the scene, and James Bulger's body was then cut in half by the train. James's severed body was discovered by a group of children 2 days later, and the forensics testified that James Bulger died before he was struck by the train. John Venables and Robert Thompson were charged with the abduction, torture, and murder of James Bulger. The case received widespread media attention and was deeply emotional and a controversial trial. The boys were found guilty of the charges, and they were initially sentenced to be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure, which allowed them to be held in custody for as long as necessary. They were sent to separate secure juvenile facilities but were eventually released on lifelong parole as young adults. The James Bulger case remains one of the most distressing and tragic true crime stories. Every time I come across this case, it just never sits right with me. I can never understand how these two 10-year-old boys could just take a 2-year-old boy away from his parents and then proceed to brutally torture him and kill him. This case is just sickening, and let me know your thoughts on it.
Japanese urban legend is one of the most chilling, disturbing ones. The legend is called Kushisaki Onna, which means the slit mouth woman. If anybody's in Japan, or if you ever go to Japan and you see a woman in a trench coat and a surgical mask and she asks you, "Am I pretty?"
Yo, I heard about this.
Run away, bro. It starts off with a woman who was really, really beautiful. She was married to a samurai. She would go out in the town and stuff. The people that would stare at her, she would ask them, "Do you think I'm pretty?" Her knowing obviously the answer, but she just liked the attention. What about her husband? Didn't like that she was getting all that attention, and there was a point where that woman ended up having an affair with another man. The samurai found out, obviously was furious, hatched a plan to basically make her pay. So there was one day where he ran up on her, pressed the knife against her cheek, and cut a smile from ear to ear. Literally told her, "Who's gonna think you're beautiful now?" She ended up dying, and she returned to Earth as a vengeful spirit who haunts the streets of Japan. She would approach you, and then she would ask you, "Am I pretty?" Depending on your answer, there's different outcomes. If you say no, you automatically die, bro. She takes out long-ass surgical scissors, she kills you. If you say yes, she gets closer to you, unravels the mask, and then you see her disfigured smile, and asks you again, "Do you think I'm pretty?" If you say yes again, she cuts the same slits, basically match her smile. People say that they came up with a way to try to avoid her is if she asks you if she's pretty, give her a generic boring answer like, "Not your average," because it'll confuse her. That gives you enough time to run away.
5 out of 10, like, you can do better.
This boy's parents bought him a gun as a Christmas present. He would end up becoming a school shooter. It was the 30th of November at Oxford High School in Michigan. Rumours had been circulating at the school about the potential of a mass shooting, and the school had investigated this. The school published a note to parents stating that they couldn't find evidence of an active threat. A horrific incident had occurred in the November where a severed deer's head was thrown off the school roof onto the playground. Teachers still deemed there to be no threat to students, though. The teachers and students had been part of active shooter drills, and the doors had safety locks fitted. Now, just as a side note, when I worked at an American summer camp, as part of my induction, we had to do active shooter drills with real firearms, and I thought it was absolutely horrifying. On the day in question, 15-year-old Ethan Crumbly entered the school armed with a semi-automatic handgun. CCTV captured him firing into the hallways and systematically going from room to room, classroom to classroom, firing at his fellow students. A voiceover on the intercom alerted students to the threat, and several students and teachers barricaded doors. Ethan went round firing his weapon through the locked doors. Police received over 100 911 calls and raced to the scene. The entire shooting lasted around 5 minutes, and Ethan callously murdered 4 students and injured 7. Students escaped out of windows and were evacuated to nearby locations. A local woman helped fleeing children into her house. Ethan was arrested unharmed. The victims were 17-year-old Madison Baldwin, 16-year-old Tate Meyer, and Hannah St. Juliana, aged 14. Tate was apparently injured trying to stop the gunman. 17-year-old Justin Schilling succumbed to his injuries just days after the shooting. Now, Ethan was charged as an adult for his crimes, and in December 2023, he was given life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, plus 24 years. Interestingly, his parents were then charged with involuntary manslaughter. It transpired that they failed to take steps that they could have taken in order to prevent the tragedy. They'd purchased the gun as a gift for Ethan and failed to keep it properly secured. They'd also actually been called into the school for a discussion after Ethan had drawn a violent picture, including a weapon. It was just hours later that he began his rampage. His parents, Jennifer and James, failed to attend court and a manhunt ensued. They were finally hunted down by police in Detroit. They were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and were given 15 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years.
This woman, a 44-year-old J.D. Watts, intentionally handed her mother, who had severe dementia, a handgun so that she could just take her own life. J.D. was her mother's primary caregiver, and it's been said that she was just sick and tired of taking care of her mother. On September 10th, home surveillance footage shows J.D. leaving her mother's bedroom with a handgun. Then she showed her mother how to use it and basically told her to use it on herself. 72-year-old Linda then fired 2 shots, taking her own life. Investigators found evidence of JD being extremely cruel to her mother. She was constantly speaking down to her and referred to her as a toddler. JD always complained about being her mother's caregiver and just wanted her to die. But she did not get away with this and was charged with felony murder in the 2nd degree.
I started shooting with a firearm in a McDonald's because the employee had forgotten the bacon in my burger. My name is Shenika Monique Torres, and I was 30 years old in 2015 when I went to McDonald's to order food. I placed my usual order at the drive-thru of a McDonald's in Michigan, ordering cheeseburgers with bacon. When I received my order, to my great disappointment, the bacon was missing from the cheeseburgers. I felt horribly betrayed and asked to speak to a restaurant manager. He apologized for the mistake and offered me a free meal as a goodwill gesture. I accepted his offer and left the McDonald's. A few hours later, hunger began to set in again. I returned to the same McDonald's and ordered the same burger once more. The employee who prepared my bacon burger forgot the bacon again. This triggered an indescribable rage in me. I then pulled out my gun and fired through the drive-thru window. Fortunately, there were no casualties. I was arrested and sentenced to serve a prison term of 3 to 7 years. What judgment do you think I deserve for what I did because of that employee who forgot the bacon?
I glued my husband's penis to his stomach while he was sleeping. I am Tracy Wood Davis, a woman who discovered that her husband was cheating. When I learned the news, I was devastated and furious, and I decided to seek revenge in a creative way to make him understand the extent of his betrayal. One night, while my husband was sound asleep, I carefully applied super glue to his penis and glued it to his stomach. My goal was to cause him embarrassment and discomfort, making him realize the pain he had inflicted on me by cheating. The next morning, my husband woke up and discovered with horror what I had done. He was forced to see a doctor to resolve the delicate situation I had put him in. My story quickly made headlines, and I became infamous for my act of revenge. I hope that my story can serve as a lesson to others facing similar situations, encouraging them to find constructive solutions to deal with infidelity.
So, I put detergent in my water every single day, and let me tell you why.
Why are there so many people on this app eating laundry detergent? I've seen a lot of bad medical advice on here, but eating laundry detergent straight out of the box for medical purposes seems to be the worst. It's ironic because tonight's episode is all about horrible medical advice that's been given throughout history. And if you think drinking borax is bad, wait until you hear about the time that a bunch of housewives accidentally got hooked on meth. So basically, during World War II, this new inhaler comes out. And doctors soon figure out that patients love this inhaler. Like, love it so much, they buy the inhaler just to crack it open and eat the medicine out of it. And doctors also realize that the patients are losing a lot of weight, which is something they can make money off of. So enter amphetamine-based weight loss pills. Doctors were prescribing this meth microdose to women by the handful. And at first, women were like, great, I have all this energy and I'm losing weight. But then they started experiencing something called amphetamine psychosis. Like, they were straight up seeing demons in their toilets and thought everyone wanted to kill them. This is one of many pieces of terrible medical advice that's been given throughout history, so follow along for more tonight. Don't get me wrong, the new Willy Wonka movie looks fine, but there's no way it's going to be as dark as the original book. We're talking dark enough to not make any cut of any of the movies. Also, I cover stuff for the Darkly Curious here, and if that's you, you might like the podcast. So in all the movies, we see the Oompa Loompas as these singing, dancing, unbothered henchmen of Willy Wonka's. But in the book, they are so much darker than that. In the book, Oompa Loompas are pygmies from Africa that Willy Wonka kidnapped and brought to his factory. Look at this passage. Once Willy Wonka realizes that they'll work for beans, he shipped them over here, every man, woman, and child in the Oompa Loompa tribe. It was easy. I smuggled them over in large packing cases with holes in them, and they all got here safely. But the book came out in 1964, and at that point, slavery had been abolished in the UK for almost 160 years. So rightfully so, people were not happy with this portrayal. But this is just a good reminder that Willy Wonka is the villain of these movies. He's a curmudgeon-y shut-in with Peter Pan syndrome who invites children to his factory to watch them die. And then he acts as if you're the one annoying him. Anyways, this one looks very light and fluffy and not that.
My mother killed me by throwing me out of the car window when I was only 2 months old. My name is Arya Rose, and this event occurred on November 20th, 2018, in Bali. My mother, Nicole Stasio, 32 years old, and originally from California, had taken me with her in the car. While we were driving, my mother unfastened me, then opened the window and heartlessly threw me out. Due to the speed at which we were traveling, I died instantly. My mother continued to drive at high speed, then opened the car door and threw herself out in an attempt to commit suicide. She didn't die but suffered serious injuries without any lasting consequences. Investigators discovered that she was suffering from severe postpartum depression, which would explain why she committed this horrendous act. My mother, Nicole Stasio, was not interrogated or judged for her actions due to her mental health condition. No justice was therefore served for what my mother did to me that day.
Did you guys know that these Disney stars were arrested and some even spent time in prison? Starting with the one that shocked me the most, Phil Lewis, who played Mr. Mosby on The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. He went to prison for manslaughter. So in 1991, way before The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody aired, Phil killed a 21-year-old girl while drinking and driving. But he was released early and only served 1 year because of the work he did in prison. Next, we got Debbie Ryan, who played Bailey Pickett on The Sweet Life on Deck. When Debbie was 22 years old, she was arrested and charged with a DUI after she crashed her car with another person and severely injured them. Okay, this one's crazy. Back in 2018, Adam Hicks, who starred in Zeke and Luther, was arrested after going around pointing guns at people and robbing them with the help of his girlfriend, Danny. He ended up getting only 5 years in prison, and now he's pursuing his music career and he's on TikTok. Now, this one definitely caught me off guard because Mitchell Musso played such an innocent kid on Hannah Montana, but he was arrested for public intoxication on August 26th of this year when he apparently stole a bag of chips from a store, but he denies this ever happened. Mitchell was also arrested back in 2011 when he was 20 years old for a DUI. Let me know which one surprised you the most because mine was Mr. Mosby.
This person predicted 9/11 and now they're predicting a nuclear war in 2023. This is the famous blind fortune teller named Baba Vanga. She predicted the 9/11 attacks and also is predicting a nuclear disaster that will devastate the entire planet before the end of 2023. Although she passed away over 25 years ago, many of her predictions are believed to have come true even after her death. Baba Vanga is said to have foreseen that a powerful country will use a biological weapon in 2023, resulting in a large number of deaths. She also predicted the end of natural pregnancies this year, with babies all being born and created in a laboratory, and the selection of specific traits like hair and eye color being controlled by the government and medical experts. It's crazy that Baba Vanga predicted this because a recent article just came out that lab-made babies could be a reality by 2028. But let's see if Baba Vanga predicts it correctly and it happens 5 years before. It's not like everything Baba Vanga predicts comes true, but a lot of the things she does predict come true, like 9/11. All in all, do you think a nuclear disaster is going to happen in 2023? Or do you think Baba Vanga is just predicting nonsense? I hope she is because I don't want any sort of nuclear war ever on Earth. And let's all hope Baba Vanga is wrong.
A Pennsylvania woman was charged with plotting to have her ex-husband's new wife killed after an undercover sting. A 56-year-old woman in Pennsylvania was arrested after allegedly attempting to hire a hitman to murder her ex-husband's new wife and her teenage daughter. Marilyn Zhu was arrested on December the 18th, 2022 and charged with attempted murder and money laundering. In December 2022, intelligence came in that Marilyn was potentially searching for a murder for hire. The Special Investigations Unit intervened to try and catch her in the act. Marilyn allegedly met up with a man that she didn't realise was an undercover police officer. She was apparently attempting to put the plan in motion. It's reported that Marilyn gave the officer 2 photos of the intended victim, $21,000 in cash, rubber gloves, and a towel to assist in carrying out the crime. It's alleged that Marilyn told the undercover officer that if it happened that the victim's daughter was there when the murder took place, she would actually need to be killed too. It's believed to have been agreed that Marilyn would then pay the hitman $20,000 extra once the job was done. Shortly after this, Marilyn was arrested, and when they searched her property, they discovered another $18,000 in cash. She's currently being held until her trial.
This is insane. This pilot was sucked out of a plane during a flight from England to Spain. This happened on June 10th, 1990 on a British Airways flight when 27 minutes into the flight, 2 of the cockpit windows came off, which caused the pilot Timothy Lancaster to be sucked out. But you would think that someone wouldn't survive this. Well, Timothy did. Since the plane was going at such a high speed, his entire body got trapped against the outside of the plane window, but his legs were still in the plane. That's when one of the flight attendants quickly grabbed Timothy's legs and held on the entire time while the co-pilot controlled the plane and tried to land right away. So imagine everyone on that flight was freaking out while Timothy was trapped against the plane for a remainder of 20 minutes at nearly 650 kilometers per hour. And by the way, if Timothy was let go, his body would have landed on the side of the wing and made its way into the engine, which would have caused the plane to crash. Fortunately, the co-pilot was able to safely land the plane, and when an investigation was done, it was discovered that the maintenance crew had replaced the window panels with incorrect bolts, which caused the windows to be blown out. Timothy explains that he was in and out of consciousness but barely remembers anything, which thank God. And get this, Timothy was back to work only 5 months later. Personally, I would never step into a plane again, let alone fly it.
This is some dark stuff going on around the world that the public definitely doesn't know about. Up first, humanity has wiped out 60% of the animal population since 1970. Just think about that for a second. 60% of all animal population has been wiped out. This is absolutely crazy, and we use all of these resources for food and clothes and just stuff like that. But when you hear that we killed 60% of the animal population, it kind of makes you think, right? Next up, we all know the mega city that Saudi Arabia is building called Neom. But did you know Saudi Arabia is sentencing people to death who refuse to move out of their homes so they could actually build the mega city Neom? And their relatives are being sentenced to multiple decades of prison time just for protesting and posting their support to the cause on social media. This is absolutely sickening, and I can't believe nobody is talking about this. This next one is going to keep us all up at night. But bacterial resistance to antibiotics is at an alarming level. There has already been instances of pan-antibiotic resistant strains of bacteria. This can throw us back to the pre-antibiotic era, which will effectively mean if you catch an infection, you will die, just like in the 1400s. Finally, women are going missing from Indian reservations across some of the United States. Many are young women and are probably being used for sex trafficking. I wonder why they're taking Indian women from Indian reservations. And I wonder why sick stuff happens like this on Earth every single day.
Someone escaped her kidnapper after being held captive for a year. The woman, whose identity is not revealed for her own safety, met James Perillo Jr. at a petrol station in New Mexico in February last year. 57-year-old James told her his name was Brett Parker. He asked if she would give him a lift to Arizona, and she quite liked him, so she said yes. The pair actually got into a consensual relationship, and things were going fine for a while until he began assaulting her. He started isolating her from family and friends and confiscated her phone and debit cards, leaving her powerless. He then spent the next year holding her captive against her will. He was actually traveling around the country with her, and prior to her escape, James had driven them to a petrol station in New Jersey. She noticed that the store had a deadbolt on the door from the inside, and it inspired her to escape. James had been continuously beating and choking her, and on the day in question, she was able to break free for a couple of seconds. It was cold out, but she sprinted back to the petrol station that they'd been at, with only a shirt and shorts on and no shoes. She ran inside and bolted the door shut just in time, as James was only a few seconds behind her. The attendant inside the petrol station helped her after the woman explained that she'd been held captive. She had deep wounds on her neck from where he'd been abusing her. James was arrested and is being held without bail due to information that police had discovered. It transpired that he may have had other victims previously. He's being charged with first-degree kidnapping, second-degree strangulation, and aggravated assault. He faces up to 47 years in prison.
This sick woman has been nicknamed the nanny from hell, and the stories of her abuse are sickening. Let me tell you, viewer discretion is heavily advised for this TikTok. So this is Nicole Lynn Walter. She was 27 years old when she was arrested, and she's from Florida. And between 2017 and 2018, she abused the children that she was nannying. The kids were only 3 years old and 15 years old, and she had been charging her clients online different rates, more expensive and less expensive, for the different types of abuse she was carrying out on these kids. Now, when investigators interviewed the 3-year-old that Nicole had been nannying, she said that Nicole, her nanny, had been, behaving inappropriately with her, and she told investigators that Nicole had been touchy with her privates. Now, when investigators got a search warrant and executed it on Nicole's home, they found a micro SD card that contained disgusting, according to them, vile images of a minor. Images that Nicole had taken herself. They also found video files on Nicole's computer that showed her completely bare in front of the children that she had been nannying, talking to the kids while she was playing with herself, if you know what I'm talking about. As in, she was toying with herself while she was talking to the kids she was nannying right there on camera. I mean, how disturbing can the story get? When pressed about all of this, Nicole told investigators that she recorded, uploaded, and sold this content to clients on the internet who were requesting her to make these sorts of sick and twisted videos. Now, keep in mind, Nicole was also uploading adult videos and images of herself to the internet and charging for them without the kids involved. But like we said at the beginning, if there were kids involved, she would charge clients extra based on what they wanted. So this is a sick story. This is a very sick individual. And this once again goes to show that it's not only men who can be pedophiles, it can be anybody. And sometimes these people don't look at all like what you would expect them to.
This is the bear video, one of the worst animal attacks caught on camera, explained. The local forest department of this village organized this bear hunt because of the bear attacks against humans in the area. The man in the video was tracking the bear for a while and even set up a trap, but he was ambushed and mauled. The victim's piercing screams alerted his colleagues, who would rush to the scene, and one of the victim's fellow hunters filmed the gruesome encounter. As you play the video, you see the man laid out on the floor wearing a green jacket with the female sloth bear on top of him, and immediately you hear the victim's awful screams, and these screams are way different from any of the screams you will ever hear. The camera zooms in and you see the bear has almost mounted the victim and has its jaws locked around the victim's face. And it seems the bear is going for the throat. Loud commotion can be heard in the background, and the crowd tries to stop the bear from attacking by firing their guns and throwing stones at it. As the victim wrestles underneath the bear, you see some of his injuries. His face and throat are covered in blood, and the ground is also stained with blood. You can see the bear bite his face and pull, ripping a piece of flesh from his face. The bear then shakes its head to get the blood off its face, and it then goes in for another bite, and this time, biting the man's throat and pulling away sharply, and it appears as a piece of flesh hanging from the victim's head. The video then ends as the mauling is still taking place. There's rumors that there's a longer version of this video, but I haven't seen it yet. According to reports, the attack lasted about 10 minutes until the bear was finally shot and killed, but the injuries the victim had would result in his death. I don't recommend looking for this video, mainly because of the graphic nature, but also because the screams of the victim are definitely the worst screams you will ever hear. Just imagine being attacked by a bear and being pinned down underneath it, while it just rips you apart and there's nothing you can do. The thought of that is just absolutely horrific.
What? Look in there, mate. Look in there. What? Look in there.
In Boston in the 1960s, women were terrified. Deadbolts and door chains were selling out as news spread about a serial killer on the loose. For a span of 2 years, vulnerable women were being murdered at a shocking rate. The mystery killer was seemingly targeting women, both young and old, and random neighborhoods, making everyone a potential target. Disturbingly, the killer seemed to leave a very specific calling card. The victims were essayed, posed, and then left with bows around their necks made of their stockings or underwear. The first murder was in June 1962. The Boston Strangler broke into the apartment of 55-year-old Anna Sleesers. She was strangled to death with her dressing gown. 2 more women were killed just weeks later. Nina Nichols and Helen Blake were found dead with a signature bow around their necks. Murders unfolded in quick succession following the first 3. In total, there were 11 known killings. Until 1964, police investigations reached dead ends. Then a convicted S offender, Albert DeSalvo, shockingly admitted to being the killer. He'd been arrested for breaking into a woman's apartment, tying her up and assaulting her. He confessed to breaking into hundreds of women's apartments and bragged about essaying at least 4 women. However, police didn't take the claims seriously initially. Albert didn't match the eyewitness descriptions they had of the Boston Strangler, and there was no physical evidence linking him to the crimes. He was actually sent to hospital for the criminally insane, and he was never convicted of the horrific crimes that he confessed to. A forensic psychiatrist found that he was a compulsive confessor who desperately needed to be recognized. 8 years later, he was stabbed to death by a fellow inmate, and due to his death, questions remained unanswered. That is, until a DNA test in 2013. Albert's body was exhumed due to advancements in technology. Now, DNA from Albert matched fluids left on a victim, Mary Sullivan's bed. Albert's family claimed that his DNA being at the scene didn't prove that he'd actually killed her, which is true. However, due to also confessing to the murder, police consider this is pretty damning evidence. It doesn't, however, confirm anything about all of the other victims in the Boston Strangler case, and some of the mystery still remains.
I think it's really freaky that people don't talk more about the connections that Epstein had in so many different worlds. So if somehow you don't know the Jeffrey Epstein story, he was arrested in 2019 and thought to be the head of a global pedophile network. And just a short while after he was arrested, he was found dead in his prison cell. Allegedly, he had taken his own life. Many people don't think that he did. And many people think that Epstein was murdered because he had so much blackmail evidence on so many politicians, actors, musicians. So let's dig a little bit deeper into all of this. So this is Shantae Davis. She's one of Epstein's accusers. She was there on so many of Epstein's trips. She alleged that he assaulted her many times over the years when she was underage. And she saw lots of horrific things that were going on the island, in his private planes, on these trips. Here's a photo of Shantae and Epstein, but I want to talk today about a trip to Africa that this group took. So apparently some years ago, Shantae, Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and some others took a philanthropic trip to Africa. But who was on this trip? Well, Bill Clinton was on this trip. There's photo evidence of that. I mean, here's a photo literally of Shantae massaging Bill Clinton's back while they were on this trip. Strange photo. Kevin Spacey was also on this trip. You can see Bill Clinton behind him. Here's another photo of Kevin Spacey and Ghislaine Maxwell. Kind of weird, right? Even Chris Tucker was on this trip. This is him and Shantae and some of the other women that were with Epstein and his crew. So my question is, what exactly happened in Africa? What were they doing? There are no real photos of any philanthropic event that they were attending. And for the life of me, I can't find any information about where they were going or what this big event with Hollywood celebrities and ex-presidents was. And I mean, there are just too many weird things about this. When Epstein's house was raided, they found this painting hanging up in his home. This has been confirmed. Even the artist who painted it has confirmed that Epstein purchased this from him. And people think that Epstein was killed because when he was hanging out, brushing elbows with all these elite people like ex-presidents, celebrities, other people that were super powerful, he was recording almost all the time. Shantae, who was present for a lot of this, even said that Epstein had cameras in places like the bathrooms, the toilets, the massage rooms, the living rooms. Everywhere on his property was being recorded 24/7. So I think it's very reasonable to think that with what was going on with Epstein, he would have a lot of damning photos and videos, evidence of powerful people doing terrible things. And what's one way to get him to shut up? Well, you can kill him. I don't know, I just think this story about this philanthropy trip to Africa is so strange. Why did they go? Why all these famous people? Why is there no press about anything ever happening there? And once again, why with Jeffrey Epstein?
This could be one of the most awful ways somebody has ever died, and whatever you do, don't look up the picture. In Canada, on July 30th, 2008, 22-year-old Tim McLean was on a bus traveling from Edmonton to Winnipeg. The bus then made a stop where a man named Vince Lee boarded. Vince Lee, a 40-year-old Canadian, suffered from untreatable schizophrenia, and without warning, he brutally attacked Tim McLean. Vince Lee sat next to Tim McLean, but Tim barely acknowledged him, and he then fell asleep against the window pane, with headphones covering his ears. According to witnesses, McLean was sleeping with his headphones on when the man sitting next to him, who was Vince Lee, suddenly produced a large knife and began stabbing him in the neck and chest. After the attack began, the bus driver pulled over to the side of the road, and he and all the other passengers fled the vehicle. The driver and 2 other men made an attempt to rescue McLean, but were chased away by Vince Lee, who slashed at them from behind the locked bus doors. Vince Lee decapitated Tim McLean and displayed his severed head to those outside the bus. Then he returned to Tim McLean's body and began severing other parts and consuming some of his flesh. Police arrived and Vince Lee was still on the bus, and the other passengers were huddled at the roadside, and some of them were crying and even vomiting. Vince Lee made an attempt to escape by driving the bus away, but the driver had engaged the emergency immobilizer system, which made the bus undrivable. Witnesses then saw Vince Lee stabbing and cutting McLean's body with a knife and carrying McLean's severed head around the bus. The police were in a standoff with Vince, and they had summoned a special negotiator and heavily armed tactical units. Police officers then observed Vince Lee eating parts of Tim McLean's body, and they also heard Vince Lee say, "I have to stay on the bus forever." Vince Lee then attempted to escape the bus again by breaking through a window, but was arrested soon afterwards, and he was shot twice with a taser, handcuffed, and placed in the back of a police car. Parts of the victim's body placed in plastic bags were retrieved from the bus, but Tim McLean's ears, nose, and tongue were found in Vince Lee's pockets. Tim McLean's eyes and heart were never found, and it was assumed that Vince Lee ate both of them. Vince Lee was found not criminally responsible for the murder due to his mental state at the time of the attack. The verdict was based on the assessment that Vince Lee was suffering from a severe mental disorder and was eventually committed to a mental health facility. I come across this case every so often, and it always hits the same. Tim McLean was so young, he was just 22 years old, and he didn't deserve this at all. And what makes this case even more sad is that 5 months after his death, his son was born. I get that Vince Lee was suffering from a severe mental disability, but I still would give him life in prison for doing this. This case is absolutely horrific, and it's definitely one of the worst out there.
Do not watch this video if you're home alone. When news of a serial killer on the loose spread, people were desperately calling the local security man to install security alarms on their homes. Little did they know, he was the killer. In January 1974, 4 members of the Otero family were murdered in Kansas. Their bodies were tragically discovered by the 3 older children who had been at school during the time of the murders. The killer took his next victims just months after this. He stalked and waited outside the home of young college student Catherine Bright. When she arrived home, he stabbed her and strangled her. He then shot her brother Kevin twice, but miraculously he survived. Kevin described the killer as having psychotic eyes. Intending to torment the local community, the mystery killer wrote a letter describing his killings. He left this in the public library and called a local paper to tell them where to find it. He stated he would kill again and named himself BTK, and no one knew what BTK stood for. He struck again in 1977. His 7th victim, Shirley Vian, was SA'd and killed while her 6-year-old son watched through the keyhole of the door. Now, shockingly, BTK at this point kept a sealed treasure chest of horrors at his family home. This is where he lived with his wife and children. It contained sick mementos from the crime scenes, including victims' underwear, driver's licenses, and pictures of him dressed up in the victims' underwear and reenacting the ways in which he'd killed them. Little did his family know that BTK, or Dennis Rader, was living a double life. His daughter described him as a strict Christian, and he helps keep the local community safe by installing security alarms on their houses. Now, business was booming as many vulnerable women contacted him to come and install security alarms on their homes amid the news of the BTK killer. When a neighbour was then killed by the BTK, Dennis reassured his family that they were safe. In actual fact, it was Dennis who had murdered the woman, 53-year-old Maureen Hedge, the night before. She was tied up and choked. In 1986, he killed his 9th victim, 28-year-old Vicky Wagirl, while her 2-year-old was in the playpen. In 1991, he committed his 10th and final crime. He broke into the home of 62-year-old grandmother Dolores Davis and killed her. He then dumped her body by a bridge. The panic died down and BTK wanted attention. It was now 2004 and he decided to send taunting letters to the media and police. He was actually caught by a letter he sent via floppy disk. Inside, police found data of a deleted file, and it was a document for the church. It was written by the church council president, Dennis Rader. A positive DNA match was found for Dennis under a victim's fingernails. He took pleasure in revealing that BTK stood for bind, torture, and kill. He also confessed to all of the murders. He was sentenced to 175 years in jail without the possibility of parole.